Just look at this pastrami. It's dripping, it's ready to go. It smells so fragrant. It's got that classic pastrami smell. I cannot wait to have a bite of this thing. If you're not making your own homemade pastrami, you're doing it wrong. And I'm telling you, you gotta try it for this upcoming St. Patrick's Day, but you gotta start now. It's gonna take 6 days to cure, so remember that. Pastrami and corned beef are pretty close to the same thing. There's a couple differences, but there are some similarities. The brine and the curing process can be the same thing. So when I make them for a gathering or whatnot, I tend to do the same exact brine and the same exact cure so that I have some ease and that people get what they would prefer, whether it's corned beef or pastrami. There's two main differences. A corned beef is typically made from the brisket, whereas a pastrami is typically made from the decal, which is a wide, lean cut of the shoulder. However, nowadays, it's pretty typical to see a pastrami that's made from a brisket as well. The other main difference is the cooking process itself. A corned beef typically is naked. It's got no rub, it's got no seasoning on top of it, and it's actually boiled, typically with cabbage or something of that sort. A pastrami usually has a rub and it's smoked over a hardwood. It can be cooled and then steamed when it's time to serve. However, when I do it, I typically just smoke it and then slice it. The first thing we have to do is get some things toasted. Over a low, medium heat in a cast iron skillet, we're gonna toast 5 tablespoons of coriander, 4 tablespoons of black pepper, and 2 tablespoons of mustard seed. We're basically gonna toast these until they get pretty fragrant and we could see that they actually turn a little bit of color. So out of this toasted mixture, we're gonna use about half of it for our brine, and we're gonna use the other half for the rub later on once this pastrami goes on to the smoker. You can split this in two right off the start and just toast some to go in the brine, and then later on toast it and then grind it or smash it. But today, we're just gonna do it all in once, Ziploc bag it, and have it ready to go for when we're ready to rub. For pastrami and corned beef, a great rule of thumb for a wet brine is to do about 50% of the meat's weight in that wet brine mixture. We're doing a 12-pound brisket that's been trimmed, so we know it's 12 pounds. So we're gonna get around 6 pounds of wet brine going. We're gonna need 3 quarts of water, a 1.5 cups of kosher salt, roughly a 1/2 cup of brown sugar, 5 cloves of smashed garlic. Because I was given this black garlic that was fermented by Jake over at Red Duck Farms, I'm gonna use this and see how it goes this time. 1 tablespoon of crushed red pepper, 1 tablespoon of whole cloves, 1 tablespoon of allspice, 1 teaspoon of ground ginger, 1 teaspoon of ground mace, 2 bay leaves that I'm just gonna crush up, 1 cinnamon stick that I'm gonna crush up as well, 2.5 teaspoons of pink curing salt, number 1. Don't get this confused for pink Himalayan salt. When you're judging the pink curing salt, number 1, it's roughly a teaspoon per every 5 pounds of meat. I took half of that toasted mixture of seasonings and threw it into my Finamill. I'm gonna take and give this a coarse grind, and we're gonna add it to the brine. Once that brine mixture gets to a rolling boil, we're gonna give it about 10 to 15 minutes to really enhance those flavors. In the meantime, I'm gonna go out to my garage to get space ready for this 5-gallon food safe bucket. I've let that brine cool down from the boil to where I could pretty much touch it, but just to make sure it doesn't cook that brisket at all for this pastrami, I'm gonna go ahead and add about 2 pounds of ice to this bucket. I'm gonna take our brine and just dump it right on in. There's a little bit left in here, so I'll go ahead and add some water just to rinse the pan out and get all that extra in. Finally, I've got my trimmed brisket here. Now, I trim this a little bit more than I usually do, just to let all that extra brine absorb into it and make sure we get this meat fully cured. So I'm gonna go ahead, dunk this in here. If there's any bit of the meat exposed, I'm gonna add just a little bit of water to make sure we've got it all the way covered. So we see that the brisket is exposed a little bit. Not a big deal, it is floating. So we're just gonna take a plate, stick it over it, and push it down. It should weigh it down a bit, enough to keep that brisket submerged. We've gotta give it ample time to cure. For this size brisket, it's gonna be about 6 days. Here's the key thing. Every single day, we're gonna go into this bucket and we're gonna move that brisket around. We wanna make sure that it's getting even. That being said, this brisket is going in the fridge to brine. So it's been a couple days that this brisket has been brining for our pastrami. I'm gonna take it out and give you guys a little look at what I look for when I'm brining one of these. The smell already is great, so aromatic. So we've done a pretty good job so far of making sure this brisket is entirely submerged. You can see right here, there's a little bit of red still. It should all look more of this color. But overall, we're doing pretty good. So I'm gonna rotate it, put it back in, and we're going back to the fridge for a few more days. We're on day 7 of this brisket that's been brining for our pastrami. I've got it right here. It's ready to go, except we gotta do one more thing. It really helps to have a second food grade bucket, because this next step, we're gonna have to desalinate our pastrami. So here, I've got my second bucket. It's about halfway full of water. We're gonna take this brisket out of our brine bucket. We're gonna rinse it off in the sink to make sure that we get all that extra salt and brine off of it. And then we're gonna put it into this bucket of just plain water for about an hour so that it pulls some of that extra salt out. It helps keep it less salty. I've done it before where I've just rinsed it, but this tastes a bit better. Since there's more water in this bucket, your brisket may float a bit. If it does, go ahead and toss a plate in there like we talked about earlier. I'm gonna give it about 45 minutes and then I'm gonna go ahead and pull out my Traeger Timberline XL and we're gonna get this thing on the grill. If you haven't already pre-toasted that coriander, black peppercorns, and mustard seeds, go ahead, do that now and get it ready for the rub on this pastrami. Our Traeger Timberline XL is started. We've got it set for 250. Next up, we're gonna pat this pastrami down with some paper towels to dry it up a bit. We're gonna use mustard as a binder, and we're gonna grind some of that toasted coriander, black pepper, mustard seeds on top of it as our rub. So let's get that done. So you might see some solids left over from that brine. That's okay. However, if there's allspice berries or whole cloves, you may want to take those off if you see them. Our brisket for this pastrami is cured, rubbed, ready to go. We've got the Traeger Timberline XL set to 250. Let's get this thing on here and get cooking. We're gonna let this thing smoke for about 6 hours, so we'll see you guys in a little bit to check on that progress. So we had to move the smoker on the porch because it is pouring out. But we got it up here, we're running, our bark looks good. We're at 160, so we're gonna take it inside, wrap it with some butcher paper. We're gonna keep it on here till it hits about 185, 190, and then we're gonna really pay attention to it. Our pastrami is at 190 degrees in the point of this brisket. So we're gonna take it inside, we're gonna let it sit a bit, and then we're gonna slice it to see how it goes. Just look at this pastrami. It's dripping, it's ready to go. It smells so fragrant. It's got that classic pastrami smell. I cannot wait to have a bite of this thing. Oh man, look at that color. That is gorgeous. Let's get a few slices ready to go. So now that we've got some of this killer pastrami here, folds right over, breaks like nothing. Let's give this bad boy a test. I gotta get a second piece real quick. The sweetness of that brown sugar brings it to a different level. It was the first time I've used brown sugar. I've been going at this brine for about 4 years now. This one tops it. This is crazy. I gotta do another bite. If you're not making your own homemade pastrami, you're doing it wrong. Stop buying that store-bought stuff. This is too easy. It's literally too easy. It takes time, but that time isn't manpower. That time is just waiting. You have to flip the brisket every day. Takes 5 minutes, if that. You gotta go in your beer fridge anyways to get a beer. You might as well flip the brisket. The time to get the brine ready is nothing, about 30 minutes or so. And then to smoke it, if you have a pellet smoker like that Traeger Timberline XL, you're good. It's easy. It takes nothing to do. If you're not making your own homemade pastrami, you're doing it wrong. And I'm telling you, you gotta try it for this upcoming St. Patrick's Day, but you gotta start now. Until St. Patrick's Day comes around, I'm gonna be slicing this, I'm gonna be eating it, and then I'm gonna make some more of it because it's that damn good. If you guys want to see more videos like this killer homemade pastrami, make sure you check out the video on my upper right shoulder here, and we'll see you guys in the next one.